start in just a moment. Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Today, we'll be doing something a little different, being that today is the 17th of Tammuz, and as we're soon going to speak about a very special day as well. First of all, what is the 17th day of Tammuz? The 17th day of Tammuz is a fast day. It is the beginning of the 3 weeks of mourning for the destruction of the temple, which occurred on the 9th of Av, and 3 weeks from today. So these 3 weeks are considered the saddest time for the Jewish people on the Jewish calendar. The 17th of Tammuz was the day that, starting with Moses coming down the mountain after seeing the Jewish people serving the golden calf, he then breaks the tablets as he sees the desecration that the Jewish people have done just 40 days after hearing from God, do not serve any other gods. The 17th of Tammuz, then later on in history, is the time when the destruction of the temple, the walls of Jerusalem were breached, and the Jewish people were then under siege from the Romans, from both, and the temple began, the people of Jerusalem and its destruction began as well. And as well as other accounts that are brought in history about things and episodes that happened, negative events that happened on the 17th of Tammuz. And for that reason, the sages have set these 3 weeks from the 17th of Tammuz until the 9th of Av as time for mourning the destruction of the temple. The Rabbi always reminds us that, of course, that as we know that anything that happens in this world is a reason, and we are not just people of history, but we make history and we live and learn from past events to be able to change current events. And being that the Torah tells us that whenever, if we can't bring a sacrifice, we should read and learn about a sacrifice. So how much more so in times of this, when we learn about it, and it's a time of destruction of the temple, it is our time that we should be in tune to constructing the temple. And being that we can't literally construct the temple, the way to do it is to learn about the details and the buildings and the whereabouts of how the temple was built in the temple times and what it means to us today in a practical application. As well as we know that the reason of why the temple was destroyed was, one of the reasons were because of lack of love to one another. There was a baseless hatred that they had to one another. So therefore the antidote to building the temple and to bring about the rebuilding of the temple is to have baseless love to one another as well. So in these 3 weeks, it's an opportune time to reconcile and to increase in love for one another, in making this world a better place, and in hopes of rebuilding the temple very, very soon. Even more so, being that today is a time where we begin the mourning of the destruction of the temple, how much more so it is also an opportune time for the rebuilding of the temple as well. As we mentioned before, today is another special day as well. 39 years ago, the Rebbe instituted the concept of the study of Rambam, which means Maimonides, that every single day one should either study from the 613 commandments that Maimonides made, or 1 chapter a day, or 3 chapters a day. 1 chapter a day, thereby finishing the entire laws of 14 books of Maimonides once every 3 years. 3 chapters a day, thereby finishing the entire 14 books of Maimonides once a year. Today is the culmination, is the day where they conclude the study of Maimonides, the 3 chapter and the 1 chapter and the book of the 613 commandments. Why is it so unique that the Rebbe instituted the study of Maimonides? Was because Maimonides in his introduction explains we're the only book that you will have, the only Torah book that includes every single facet of the Torah, whether applicable today or not, is Maimonides. Meaning, if you open up a code of Jewish law, you will only find laws which are applicable for today's day and age. You won't find laws pertaining to the Holy Temple. You won't find laws pertaining to the Messianic era. It's only laws pertaining for a Jew that's living in exile. However, Maimonides, when he wrote his book, his purpose of his book and his 14 books, which took him over 10 years to write, was for the purpose that when one studies Maimonides, they can study the entire Torah. And thereby, the Rebbe explained that being that it is impossible for us to observe all the 613 commandments for physical, practical reasons. Number one, we don't have the Holy Temple. Number two, many mitzvahs are not applicable to every single person. You have to be from a Kohen or a Levite or a king or a woman or a man. Each one of the mitzvahs apply in different places. Therefore, by studying Maimonides, by studying these mitzvahs, we can then take part of the study when we study the 613 commandments, though we may not be observing them in the practical sense, but by studying them, we then can observe them to the best of our ability just by the concept and the virtue of studying them. So thereby was instituted 39 years ago, and today we finished the 39th cycle of the study of Rambam, the study of Maimonides. So today, in that honor, we will conclude here the study of Maimonides and learn the last verse, the last chapter, the last paragraph, I should say, of Maimonides, and then also discuss the first paragraph that Maimonides talks about. The last few laws that Maimonides discusses are the laws concerning the Messianic era. And not only the laws pertaining to the Messianic era, but anything we know about the Messianic era is only from what Maimonides explains to us and how extrapolated from the Torah. As in last week's Torah reading, we read about the prophecies of the Messianic era. And Maimonides concludes his book of Yad HaChazaka, which means a strong arm, of 14 sections of covering every facet in Jewish law, and concludes as follows. And he says that the great sages only had the great desire for the time of the coming of Mashiach. Not that they should be able to govern or rule the world, not that they should be able to sit back and relax and everybody else should do everything for them, but on the contrary, that they should be able to be involved and only occupy themselves with the study of Torah, that they should be able to merit the world to come as explained in the laws of repentance. And Maimonides concludes as follows. And at that time, in the coming of Mashiach, there will not be any war, no hunger. There will be no jealousy, no animosity. The good will be plentiful, and all goods will be found like earth. The entire universe's interest will only be to know the knowledge of God. Therefore, he continues, that all Jews will be great scholars in knowing the hidden concepts of the Torah, knowing the reasons and the rationales, and seeing and understanding the greatness of the Creator according to the ability of a human's capability. And he concludes, Ki mola haaretz, as it says in the verse, Ki mola haaretz deus Hashem kamayim layom mechasim, as the world will be filled with the knowledge of God as water hovers over the sea. This concludes the book of Maimonides. Maimonides over here concludes the book of Maimonides by telling us of what the utopia of Judaism is all about. What is the purpose of why we study, why we pray, why we make this world a better place? Maimonides explains we're not here just to indulge in the physical pleasures, to just enjoy in the physical materialistic pleasures. Even in the time of the coming of Mashiach, when all those pleasures will be plentiful, we'll see them growing on the street. We'll see them all over the place. What will our interest be is only to be the knowledge of God. What does it mean to know the knowledge of God? And he gives the example as the water hovers over the sea. What does it mean, the water hovering over the sea? The water over the sea becomes one identity. It becomes one entity. The same idea is also, we can have knowledge, but that knowledge should not necessarily permeate or affect the individual. The knowledge can be something outside of the person. Yes, I know a very nice intellect, but what does it do to me? How does it affect my life? And therefore, he explains that when Mashiach comes, Ki mola haaretz deus Hashem, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, not just as a subject, as another thing that we know about, and it may not have any relevance to what we do. On the contrary, the world will be permeated with the feeling and the essence of God, that the world itself will cry out godliness. As it says, as the Talmud uses the terminology, a person's going to want to take a fig off a tree, and a tree will say it's Shabbos today, meaning the world will feel that conscious awareness of godliness, not just as a knowledge that's aloof, But as water hovers over the sea, the same way one doesn't separate the water from the sea, it's one entity. So too, when Mashiach comes, the knowledge of God will be one entity with the individual and with the comprehension and with our understanding of God. In fact, Maimonides, as we know, the beginning and the end always have a connection. The beginning and the end have a correlation and a relationship. And therefore, Maimonides begins this set of 14 books of volumes of laws, which the Yad HaChazaka, also with this concept of knowing the knowledge of God. Maimonides chooses four words, which those four words are actually the acronym of God's name. But he says the following: Yesod, and this is the beginning of Maimonides, because we know as in Judaism, it's all one big circle. In Simchas Torah, we finish the Torah and we start the Torah from anew again. So today, though we are finishing the cycle of Maimonides, we are also beginning a new cycle of Maimonides, the 40th cycle. And Maimonides begins as follows. And in fact, this is an opportune time if anybody ever wants to join learning Maimonides. There are online classes on Chabad.org, on JewishAllied.com. We always have online classes of Maimonides, which one can join either one of these cycles and listen in to very intuitive and interesting classes concerning and going according to the daily learning of Maimonides. But Maimonides begins as follows. And he says, and I'll just read the Hebrew words, because that's the acronym of God's name. Yesod ha-Yesodis Amud ha-Chachmas. The foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all knowledge is to know that there is one creator, and he is the creator of all creations, and everything that is here from heaven to earth and everything in between are only from the trueness of this creation. What is Maimonides telling us over here? Maimonides continuing from where he ended, knowing that when Mashiach comes, the world will come to a certain conscious reality, understanding and realizing the truth in God. This is exactly what the true truism, so to speak, is, which is that everything that's in this world that we see fades after a while. So it's not really true. The only true existence is God, because God is past, present, and future. Everything else, heaven, earth, and anything in between, has its time, it came, and it can go. And therefore, they are not true creations. The only true creations and the founding of all creations is God, and God makes everything into existence because he's the only true creation. So too, when Mashiach will come, we will see this truth. We'll see how everything in the world only exists only because of God, thereby appreciating the godliness, understanding and appreciating what its true meaning of godliness. And this is what the sages of all times have cherished for. To not only keep something in intellect, but that we should actually be able to feel, appreciate, and understand godliness and see it in every single day of our life. This is the wish. This is the hope, as much as Maimonides concludes his 14 books, that every single one of us and every single mitzvah we do, every single day in our prayers, we say 3 times just in the Amidah, asking God to bring about that time, the messianic revelation, the revelation when we will see God's knowledge in the world like water hovers over the sea. Thank you for listening and tuning in today. Actually, at 1:30 p.m., there's going to be a grand finale or a grand celebration in honor of the culminating of the 39th cycle of the study of Maimonides. You can see it online at siyum.live. That's SIYUM.live, SIYUM.live, to join in this grand celebration. All the best. Have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow as we have our overview on the Parsha and the Torah reading of the week. Lunch break with the Rabbi, 1 p.m. God bless.